All right. Now, remembering Mama wouldn't be complete without a Toady story, now would it? So, for those of you who have heard all the Toady stories from Mama, please do not judge me too terribly harshly here if I get some of the details incorrect. Just enjoy the story and remember, it's been a long time since I've heard the real stories. In May, it will have been 18 years since we lost Mama. So, um, it's hard to think that I'm, goodness gracious, only 5 years younger than she was. All right, but here goes. Here goes a Toady story. This one is about chocolate. Do you love chocolate? Toady loved chocolate. And Toady loved to go to Aunt Maud and Uncle Fred's house. They lived just down the hill from her. And on this particular day, Toady had been playing house. She had been playing Mrs. Smith, and her mama was Mrs. Carter. And she had fed her baby and changed her baby's diapers, and she had colored pictures, and she had chatted with Mama and rode her tricycle around on the big redwood stump. And now she sat on the back porch, swinging her legs. Mama was washing diapers again. Mama was always washing diapers. But on this particular day, Toady said, Mama, can I go down and visit Aunt Maudie? Mama said, well, I suppose you can, Toady. You go ahead. So Toady got up and she went out the front door, through the house and out the front door and down the big steps and down the driveway and across the garden, and she came up to Aunt Maudie and Uncle Fred's back door and she knocked on it. And probably better not knock, my doggies are going to start barking over here. Anyway, they were like, come in. And so Toady went to open the door and it went creak. And Toady went in and it went bam, and it slammed shut right behind her, made Toady jump. But in she was, and Aunt Maudie gave her just a great big hug. And do you know what Aunt Maudie was doing? Oh, she was making blackberry jam. Do you like blackberries? Oh, Toady liked blackberries. And so she got to help Aunt Maudie finish up the blackberry jam. But she didn't get one taste, not one little lick even of a spoon. And then Aunt Maudie said, don't you think we should make some fudge? I think Uncle Fred would like some fudge. Oh, Toady would like some fudge. She loved fudge. And so Aunt Maudie got out the chocolate and all the ingredients and the things to make fudge. And they melted down the chocolate and added all the ingredients that go. Can you tell I don't even know what all the ingredients are in fudge? Because I have never made fudge myself and I can't remember what went in there. I should have done my research. Anyway, all right. So now they have all this fudge and they put it in a pan to cool and they set it aside. And when it was all cool, they went back and Aunt Maudie carefully cut it. She cut it all into all these nice little squares. And then she stacked them all up until there was one right on the top. And then she says, now Uncle Fred is getting too fat. So we're going to have to hide these because if he finds them, he's going to eat them all up. And so Aunt Maudie opened the cupboard and she took that plate and she put it way up on top where it couldn't be seen, and she hid it up there and closed the cupboard. Then Aunt Maudie said she had to go to town. And Toady was really sad because she didn't even get one little taste of fudge. Oh, man. So Toady had to go home because Aunt Maudie was going to town. So she went to the back door and she opened it and it went creak. Bam! Scared her again. Boy, and off she went back across the garden and up the driveway. And she got home and she played with her doll and she colored in her color book and she rode her tricycle. And she was sitting on the back porch again and her feet were dangling. Mama was hanging diapers on the line now. And you know what? She says, wonder if Aunt Maudie is still in town because, she couldn't quite get out of her mind fudge. And she kept thinking about her. She really had wanted some. She really wanted to taste that fudge. Well, the more she thought about it, the more she wondered if Aunt Maudie was home. Maybe she could sneak down there and she could just have one piece. Nobody would know, right? So she went around the house, down the driveway, and up to the back door, and she knocked. And I'm not going to knock this time because I don't want my dogs to bark during the story. She knocked on the door and nobody answered. So she opened the door and it went creak. And Toady poked her head in. Anybody home? Anybody there? Hello? And you know what? Nobody answered. But this time Toady was really careful with the door. She remembered it slammed. She didn't want to get scared or make a big bang. And so she slowly let it close behind her creak. And she went in the kitchen. And the cupboard was pretty tall and Toady was pretty little. So she went over to the table and she got a kitchen chair. And she pulled it over there to where she could climb up on the chair and climb up on the counter. And if she stood on the counter and on her tippy toes, she could just reach that plate. And she carefully brought it down. And she sat down on the counter and she took that piece off the top. And she ate it, and oh, it was so good. And she carefully stacked them all up so there was one on the top. But man, that piece looked good. And so she ate that piece. And then she ate another one and she carefully stacked them up. And she's starting to feel a little guilty, but she ate a couple more pieces and she stacked them back up so there was one on the top. But she's thinking, oh man, I don't know. I think that they'll know there's some missing. I sure hope not. And Toady stood back up. She stood on her tippy toes and she put the plate back up in the cupboard. And she got down and she wiped off the counter and she put the chair back and wiped off the chair. And she went through the kitchen to the door and she opened it carefully and it went creak. And she closed it carefully, creak, and she went home. But you know what? She didn't feel very good. Her tummy hurt from eating a lot of chocolate. But you know what was worse? Yeah, she didn't feel so good inside because Because was it right for her to go and eat that chocolate at Maudie's house? Was it hers? That's stealing, isn't it? And the Bible tells us we are not to steal. And so Toady went home. Mama said it was supper time, but Toady didn't want to eat supper. So Mama figured she was sick, and so she sent her for her bath. And Toady took her bath, and she said her prayers, and she determined she was going to be very good. But the next day, Aunt Maudie came up, and she says, Toady, do you know anything about the chocolate? Some was missing. Did Toady know? She did. Did Toady tell the truth? No. Toady said she didn't know anything about it, and Aunt Maudie was like, that Uncle Fred. And it was dismissed. And you know what? Toady grew and grew and grew and grew and grew. And she got big enough to go to summer camp. In fact, I think she was 12 or maybe 13 years old, something like that. And she had a friend at summer camp who was handicapped. And the summer camp she went to was Redwood Creek. And Redwood Creek, they would push a bunch of gravel with some culverts that went through and make a dam. I think they still do it out there. They did it when I was a kid. And it dammed it up and made a swimming hole. But you had to be careful because you could get sucked into those culverts. Some of the big kids would go through them, but it was very dangerous. They were not supposed to because there were these bolts that stuck into the culvert, and your bathing suits could get hung up on them, and you could get stuck in there and you could drown. So it wasn't very safe. But because of this water coming that went through the culverts, all the inner tubes would get all pulled around the entrances of the culverts that went through. And on this day, she had been told, nobody goes down there. I mean, this was like the first day of camp. And nobody goes to the creek without the lifeguards. But she knew that if she didn't get there first and get an inner tube, they would be all gone, and her friend that was handicapped wouldn't get an inner tube. And so she decided she was going to brave it and go and get an inner tube for her friend. And they went down there before the rest of the group went and before there was a lifeguard. And Toady went in that water, and she went over to where the inner tubes were, and it was deeper over there, and she got a hold of one, but she got sucked in. And you know what happened? Her bathing suit got stuck, and she was down underneath of the water, and she was trying to hold on to the edges of the culvert with her fingers, trying to get her face up so she could get some air. And she was going to drown, and she knew it. And you know what came to her mind? Jesus, if you will save me and get me out of here so that I don't drown, I promise I will give you my heart, and I will serve you for the rest of my life, and I'll make things right with Aunt Maudie. She had never forgotten in all those years. Well, you know what? Somehow, God gave her crippled friend the strength to pull her out, and Toady was saved. Well, after summer camp, Toady decided she was going to for sure give her heart to Jesus, and she studied for baptism. And it was the morning of her baptism, and Toady knew what she had to do. So she went out the front door and across the porch and down the steps and down the driveway. But instead of going in and through the back, she went to the front of the house and went up their steps and across their porch, and she knocked on the front door. And Aunt Maudie said, "Well, Toady, don't you look beautiful? Happy Sabbath." And Toady came in. She was wrapped in a great big hug. And Aunt Maudie was, of course, they were very happy Toady was giving her heart to Jesus. And Toady said, "Aunt Maudie, I need to ask your forgiveness." And she goes, "Well, my goodness, what do you need to tell me you're sorry for?" And she said, "Well, do you remember a really long time ago when I was a little girl, I came down here and helped you finish up the blackberry jam, and then we made fudge for Uncle Fred, and you stacked it all up and you put it way up in the top of the cupboard. And then later I snuck down here and I ate a lot of chocolate, and you came and asked me the next day if I knew anything about it, and I lied, and I told you no. But I'm the one, Aunt Maudie, that stole that chocolate." Well, you know, the wonderful thing about forgiveness, Aunt Maudie didn't remember, but she wrapped Toady in the biggest, warmest hug ever and said she was forgiven. And that day, Toady was baptized and gave her heart to Jesus. And you know, I'm so grateful for my mama's example, giving her heart to Jesus. I know that Toady had a lot of struggles in life. She had times when she was close to Jesus and times where she struggled. But I know that she gave her heart fully and complete to Jesus. And one day we will see her again when Jesus comes in the clouds. So remember, honor and obey your parents. Don't steal and don't tell lies. And you know what? One day soon, we will see Jesus. God bless you.